discussions. The Secretariat has also created a parallel Microsoft Teams meeting, which can be used to collect questions that representatives of states parties away from New York may have. The connection details were shared with the NPT regional group coordinators by the Secretariat. I hope that you have all received them. Delegations watching the proceedings remotely are thus invited to submit any questions or comments through the chat functions of the Microsoft Teams meeting, which the Secretariat will compile. And I want to stress that both the video and audio functions on Teams have been disabled. I also want to stress that I will do my best to address any and as many of these questions as possible. And I hope this arrangement is acceptable to all delegations. I would like to begin again by expressing my gratitude for the confidence that you have placed in me as President-designate of the 2026 NPT Review Conference. And I also want to thank the Chair-designates of the main committees 1, 2, and 3 for their invaluable support to me thus far as members of my Bureau. In the last few months and following the practice of my predecessors, I have done my utmost to engage with all states parties in an open, impartial, and transparent manner. And as I've stated repeatedly, all states parties are equal players in the NPT process, and it is important for me to hear the views and the proposals of each and every one of you. To this end, I have held the traditional informal consultations with regional groups in Vienna in November. I also held an initial briefing for states parties here in New York at the sidelines of the first committee session, and I will be in Geneva next week to conduct the same regional consultations. In addition to that, with thanks to the support of the European Union, I have also been able to conduct a number of regional consultations in Asia Pacific, in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Latin America and the Caribbean. So 4 regional consultations in your respective regional settings. The consultations took place respectively in Hanoi in October 2025, in Addis Ababa in November, in Amman more recently in January, and also in Panama City in February. Allow me to take now the opportunity to share with you very briefly an overview of the key issues that have emerged from these regional consultations that I have been holding over the past 5 months. First, on disarmament, across all regions, there was a clear and consistent concern regarding the lack of tangible progress under Article 6. Many delegations stressed that the credibility of the treaty depends on such progress, particularly in a security climate that is marked by modernization of arsenals and heightened nuclear rhetoric. Another recurring theme was found in calls for measurable, time-bound, and verifiable steps, accompanied by greater transparency and more standardized reporting by nuclear weapon states. At the same time, there was broad support for practical measures to prevent nuclear war, consistent with the preamble of the treaty, including doctrinal restraint, reductions in alert levels, and strengthened communication channels, while underscoring that such measures cannot substitute for actual steps in disarmament. The entry into force of the CTBT and the commencement of negotiations on an FMCT were frequently cited as benchmarks that could demonstrate collective commitment to the disarmament pillar. Many delegations also reiterated long-standing calls for legally binding negative security assurances, viewing them as an essential element of building confidence and addressing perceived asymmetries within the treaty. Several regions also drew attention to emerging technologies, particularly the integration of artificial intelligence into nuclear command control communication systems as an issue that the treaty framework cannot afford to ignore. On non-proliferation, all delegations reaffirmed the NPT as the cornerstone of global disarmament and non-proliferation regime, and emphasized the indispensable role of the IAEA safeguard system. There was strong support for universal application of comprehensive safeguards agreements and broader application and adoption of the additional protocols. Across regions, concerns were raised regarding nuclear sharing and extended deterrence arrangements, naval nuclear propulsion, and the implications of emerging dual-use technologies. Many delegations also underscored the continued value of nuclear weapon-free zones as practical instruments for non-proliferation and confidence building, while noting that such regional arrangements complement the global safeguard system and reinforce collective security. Throughout the discussions, it was emphasized that non-proliferation efforts must be implemented in a balanced manner and that their credibility ultimately depends on faithful progress across all three pillars of the treaty. On peaceful uses, there was a consistent reaffirmation that Article 4 and the inalienable right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes without discrimination remain central to the treaty's grand bargain. Delegations emphasized the tangible contribution of nuclear science and technology to health, agriculture, water management, energy diversification, and climate resilience. Strong support was expressed for predictable and sustainable funding of the IAEA Technical Cooperation Program. At the same time, many stressed that non-proliferation measures should not hinder access for states parties that are in full compliance with their obligations. The growing interest in small modular reactors and other advanced nuclear technologies was noted as presenting both an opportunity and conferring added responsibilities, requiring new or strengthened approaches to safeguards, safety, and security. Numerous interventions also highlighted the link between peaceful uses and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, underscoring that nuclear applications contribute concretely to poverty reduction, to public health, environmental protection, and sustainable economic growth. Finally, on strengthening the review process, states parties have showed continued interest in measures to strengthen the review process of the treaty. There was broad support in all regions for enhancing continuity and coherence throughout the review cycles and calls for earlier circulation of documents, greater transparency, and more inclusive working methods. There was also strong interest in more structured and standardized reporting, clearer benchmarks, and improved accountability, alongside proposals to ensure that regional perspectives are meaningfully reflected in both process and outcome. There remains strong interest in interactive, in-person reporting of the implementation of the commitments given under the treaty. And importantly, many delegations stressed that strengthening the review process is not simply about improving the modalities of the next review cycle, but about reinforcing the credibility, effectiveness, resilience of the treaty as a whole and over the long term. As noted, I have now engaged in consultations in all these regions, some capitals in Vienna and New York. I have not yet finished my consultations. I will be in Geneva next week and to engage with delegations there. However, I think that I have heard a sufficient amount of information from states parties to use this opportunity to outline some of my own thinking on the organization of the review conference. As many of you have said to me, a third consecutive review conference that does not produce a consensus outcome could irreparably damage the treaty. Over the past week, tensions affecting international peace and security have unfolded in one of the worst ways imaginable. The international system feels unusually brittle. War continues in the Middle East as we speak. Yesterday and before that, we heard announcements framed as prudent and necessary adaptations to dangerous realities. Yet, they seem to push us further from our collective commitment and towards global nuclear catastrophe. This geopolitical context compels us to set our priorities straight. At this especially fragile moment, securing an outcome to the conference is not a procedural ambition. It is necessary to prevent an erosion in our collective commitment, first in words and then in actions. My number one priority, therefore, is to create the conditions to enable a consensus outcome, while of course understanding that substance and political will determine the adoption of an outcome. It is my intent to create an atmosphere and framework that fosters substantive convergence. Create a substantive convergence and generates the necessary political will to achieve a result. I have also taken very careful note of many of your concerns regarding transparency, efficiency, and above all, inclusivity. Every state party has a stake in the enduring health of this treaty, and therefore every state party should be able to have their views heard and their positions considered. To that end, it is my intention to make this RevCon as open, transparent, and inclusive as possible. And given the number of issues we need to consider and the gulfs between states on many of them, we may also need to use our time more wisely. As you are all aware, the third session of the PrepCom succeeded in taking many decisions related to the organization of the review conference, and it is my intention to utilize consultations such as these to reach an agreement among states parties on the other outstanding organizational matters. The first issue that I wish to raise today is the issue of subsidiary bodies. As states parties are aware, it is not a requirement for each review conference to convene subsidiary bodies. According to the 1995 decision on strengthening the review process, subsidiary bodies could be established, and the PrepCom should recommend the establishment of these subsidiary bodies. I have also heard from numerous delegations that the discussions held in the subsidiary bodies have often been duplicative to the discussions held in the main committees. Moreover, the broad nature of their topics is inconsistent with the original intent behind their establishment. In light of your comments, especially about inclusivity, transparency, and efficiency, I am now of the opinion that it would be beneficial for the 2026 review conference to hold all of its substantive discussions during the main committee meetings themselves. And in lieu of the subsidiary bodies, the main committees could hold structured thematic dialogues on specific topics. And these topics could include the issues that have traditionally been considered in the subsidiary bodies. It is my suggestion to hold 2 sessions, that is 1 full day of meetings, on thematic dialogues on the following. In Main Committee 1, I propose to have 1 session on the implementation of Article 6 over the next review cycle, and 1 session on measures to prevent nuclear war. In Main Committee 2, I propose to have 2 sessions on nuclear weapon-free zones, with a particular focus on the implementation of the 1995 resolution on the Middle East. In Main Committee 3, 2 sessions on strengthen the review process. The placement of these topics is consistent with the decision taken by the preparatory committee on the allocation of items to the main committees. The second issue I wish to raise is making better use of the main committees in negotiating the final outcome text. I have heard from a vast majority of states parties that the early introduction of text would be beneficial to achieving an outcome, would reduce duplication, and increase transparency and inclusivity, enhance effectiveness, and give us a much better shot at success. It is therefore my intention to commence negotiations on elements of the final outcome document during the second week of the conference. We are undertaking our endeavors in a complicated environment, not just external security environment, but within the UN itself. And we need time to engage in substantive discussions, coordinate within and amongst ourselves, and to truly put our heads together to make a difference this time around, instead of merely reacting to events as they unfold. We need to make the absolute best of the use of our time. The last two review conferences did not fail to achieve consensus because of process, but they also provided animus for avoiding a business as usual approach to this year's review conference. We need to do whatever we can to ensure success, and that is my guiding principle, and that is what I have heard from you. I hope that we can discuss these issues today, and if more I complete my briefing to you, and I will turn now to the second part of today, which is the exchange of views on the 2026 review conference. And without prejudice to any interventions, I would be grateful if you could provide your views on the following topics. First, your substantive priorities and concrete proposals for how best to address these issues at the review conference. Second, your views on my proposals regarding the organization of the RevCon. And third, any questions you may have regarding my plans in the lead up and during the review conference. And it is now my pleasure to open the floor and turn it over to you, states parties, to hear your views and expectations for the upcoming review conference. The floor is open. I recognize the distinguished representative of. Finally, on strengthening the review process, states parties have showed continued interest in measures to strengthen the review process of the treaty. There was broad support in all regions for enhancing continuity and coherence throughout the review cycles, and calls for earlier circulation of documents, greater transparency, and more inclusive working methods. There was also strong interest in more structured and standardized reporting, clearer benchmarks, and improved accountability, alongside proposals to ensure that regional perspectives are meaningfully reflected in both process and outcome. There remains strong interest in interactive, in-person reporting of the implementation of the commitments given under the treaty. And importantly, many delegations stressed that strengthening the review process is not simply about improving the modalities of the next review cycle, but about reinforcing the credibility, effectiveness, resilience of the treaty as a whole and over the long term. As noted, I have now engaged in consultations in all these regions, some capitals in Vienna and New York. I have not yet finished my consultations. I will be in Geneva next week and to engage with the delegations there. However, I think that I have heard a sufficient amount of information from states parties to use this opportunity to outline some of my own thinking on the organization of the review conference. As many of you have said to me, a third consecutive review conference that does not produce a consensus outcome could irreparably damage the treaty. Over the past week, tensions affecting international peace and security have unfolded in one of the worst ways imaginable. The international system feels unusually brittle, War continues in the Middle East as we speak. Yesterday and before that, we heard announcements framed as prudent and necessary adaptations to dangerous realities. Yet, they seem to push us further from our collective commitment and towards global nuclear catastrophe. This geopolitical context compels us to set our priorities straight. At this especially fragile moment, securing an outcome to the conference is not a procedural ambition. It is necessary to prevent an erosion in our collective commitment, first in words and then in actions. My number one priority, therefore, is to create the conditions to enable a consensus outcome, while, of course, understanding that substance and political will determine the adoption of an outcome. It is my intent to create an atmosphere and framework that fosters substantive convergence. Create a substantive convergence and generates the necessary political will to achieve a result. I have also taken very careful note of many of your concerns regarding transparency, efficiency, and above all, inclusivity. Every state party has a stake in the enduring health of this treaty, and therefore every state party should be able to have their views heard and their positions considered. To that end, it is my intention to make this RevCon as open, transparent, and inclusive as possible. And given the number of issues we need to consider and the gulfs between states on many of them, we may also need to use our time more wisely. As you are all aware, the third session of the PrepCom succeeded in taking many decisions related to the organization of the review conference, and it is my intention to utilize consultations such as these to reach an agreement among states parties on the other outstanding organizational matters. The first issue that I wish to raise today is the issue of subsidiary bodies. As states parties are aware, it is not a requirement for each review conference to convene subsidiary bodies. According to the 1995 decision on strengthening the review process, subsidiary bodies could be established, and the PrepCom should recommend the establishment of these subsidiary bodies. I've also heard from numerous delegations that the discussions held in the subsidiary bodies have often been duplicative to the discussions held in the main committees. Moreover, the broad nature of their topics is inconsistent with the original intent behind their establishment. In light of your comments, especially about inclusivity, transparency, and efficiency, I am now of the opinion that it would be beneficial for the 2026 review conference to hold all of its substantive discussions during the main committee meetings themselves. And in lieu of the subsidiary bodies, the main committees could hold structured thematic dialogues on specific topics. And these topics could include the issues that have traditionally been considered in the subsidiary bodies. It is my suggestion to hold 2 sessions, that is 1 full day of meetings, on thematic dialogues on the following. In Main Committee 1, I propose to have 1 session on the implementation of Article 6 over the next review cycle, and 1 session on measures to prevent nuclear war. In Main Committee 2, I propose to have 2 sessions on nuclear weapon-free zones, with a particular focus on the implementation of the 1995 resolution on the Middle East. In Main Committee 3, 2 sessions on strengthen the review process. The placement of these topics is consistent with the decision taken by the preparatory committee on the allocation of items to the main committees. The second issue I wish to raise is making better use of the main committees in negotiating the final outcome text. I have heard from a vast majority of states parties that the early introduction of text would be beneficial to achieving an outcome, would reduce duplication and increase transparency and inclusivity, enhance effectiveness, and give us a much better shot at success. It is therefore my intention to commence negotiations on elements of the final outcome document during the second week of the conference. We are undertaking our endeavors in a complicated environment, not just external security environment, but within the UN itself. And we need time to engage in substantive discussions, coordinate within and amongst ourselves, and to truly put our heads together to make a difference this time around, instead of merely reacting to events as they unfold. We need to make the absolute best of the use of our time. The last two review conferences did not fail to achieve consensus because of process, but they also provided animus for avoiding a business as usual approach to this year's review conference. We need to do whatever we can to ensure success, and that is my guiding principle, and that is what I have heard from you. I hope that we can discuss these issues today, and if more thought is required, during the forthcoming consultations in Geneva as well. With that, I complete my briefing to you, and I will turn now to the second part of today, which is the exchange of views on the 2026 review conference. And without prejudice to any interventions, I would be grateful if you could provide your views on the following topics. First, your substantive priorities and concrete proposals for how best to address these issues at the review conference. Second, your views on my proposals regarding the organization of the RevCon. And third, any questions you may have regarding my plans in the lead up and during the review conference. And it is now my pleasure to open the floor and turn it over to you, states parties, to hear your views and expectations for the upcoming review conference. The floor is open. I recognize the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Yes. Thank you, Ambassador, and good morning to all. Before delivering my intervention on behalf of the African group, I have to say the Arab group, to say that it was prepared in Arabic, so it just translates to English. So if you hear anything that sounds weird, the text was not reviewed. So, Excellency, it's another statement for a different meeting. Ambassador Do Hong Yet, permanent representative of the Social Republic of Vietnam and president-designate of the Review Conference of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Arab Group. The Arab Group is pleased to reaffirm its full support for the president-designate of the conference, particularly in his capacity as representative of the non-aligned movement in this high-level position. We renew our determination to work seriously in cooperation with you, Mr. President, and with all state parties to ensure the success of the 11th session of the Review Conference, including through the candidatures of the three or four Arab states, Algeria, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Egypt, for membership in the Bureau of the Review Conference. The Arab Group expresses its sincere appreciation to the President-designate for the diligent efforts he has undertaken over the past months and for his commitment to intensive, inclusive, and transparent consultations with the various regional groups and states parties, including through useful informal regional consultations. This included a dedicated round for the countries of the Middle East and North Africa held on 7 and 8 January in Amman, Jordan. as well as an earlier round for African countries in Addis Ababa in December. These consultations provided a valuable opportunity for the President-designate to gain a detailed understanding of the priorities and concerns of the Arab states. Mr. President-designate, the Arab Group considers the adoption of a consensual and substantive final outcome to be a fundamental condition for the success of the upcoming review conference. The group stresses that the desired final outcome should achieve balance and parity in addressing the three pillars of the treaty without selectivity or discrimination, taking into account the significant shortcomings in the nuclear disarmament pillar. In this regard, we welcome the President-designate's announcements of his intention to begin early consultations on a draft final outcome. The Arab Group further emphasized that the final document we seek must reaffirm the existing legal and political commitments under the treaty and the outcomes of previous review conferences, including those related to the implementation of nuclear disarmament obligations under Article 6, and build upon them through practical measures that would help translate those commitments into tangible, real-world results. We take this opportunity to stress that the shared recognition of the difficult current international security and geopolitical circumstances should not serve as a pretext for lowering ambitions in achieving satisfactory progress or reducing the expected level of cooperation between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. We have already presented in detail to the President-designate the priorities and aspirations of the Arab Group for the review conference, and the Arab Group has submitted a working paper elaborating these concerns more broadly. It was submitted yesterday. We briefly highlight the priorities of implementing nuclear disarmament obligations, achieving the universality of the treaty, particularly in the Middle East, enhancing the enjoyment of the inalienable right to peaceful uses without restrictions or discrimination, and advancing transparency and accountability. Above all, as a central priority, we support the establishment of a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction by renewing commitments to the implementation of the 1995 resolution or decision, and the responsibility of three co-sponsors by recognizing the constructive and positive contributions of the annual UN conference and its 6 sessions to date, most recently held last November under the presidency of the Kingdom of Morocco. Your Excellency Ambassador Viet, the Arab Group has listened with interest to the proposals and ideas you have put forward regarding the conference and its organizational structure. It expresses its appreciation and understanding of the President-designate's desire to enhance efficiency and raise the level of transparency and inclusiveness, principles which the Arab Group support in principle, while noting that the failure to achieve positive outcomes in previous conference sessions was not due to organizational considerations or working methods, but rather to the absence of political will, particularly on part of nuclear weapon states. In this context, the Arab Group looks forward to the President-designate's understanding of the difficulty the Arab Group faces in agreeing to the proposal to dispense with the subsidiary bodies established under the 3 main committees. The group believes that these bodies have made positive and constructive contributions since their activation in 2000. Each also conveys an important political message regarding the special attention given by the review process to the issues addressed within the subsidiary bodies, including Subsidiary Body 2 and its role in addressing the implementation of the 1995 decision on the Middle East. Accordingly, the Arab group calls on the president-designate to consider this proposal and to formulate the organizational structure of the conference in line with established precedents through the full and appropriate utilization of the main committees and their subsidiary bodies, given the beneficial impacts this would have on the conference. With that, I thank you. And again, this is translation from ChatGPT, just 2 minutes before I read the statement.
I thank the distinguished representative of Algeria and ChatGPT for that statement. I now invite the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran to be followed by South Africa.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran takes the floor with profound regret and grave concern. On February 28th, the United States and the Israeli regime carried out a premeditated, unlawful, and unprovoked armed attack against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Islamic Republic of Iran. These acts constitute a blatant violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter and of the preparatory norm prohibiting the use of force. It amounts to a clear act of aggression and represents a serious threat to international and regional peace and security. These indiscriminate strikes have resulted in the tragic loss of innocent civilian lives, including women and children. In one particularly shocking incident, an elementary school in the city of Nueva was struck, claiming the lives of 175 innocent schoolgirls and injuring many others. The martyrdom of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, not only the Iranian religion leader, but also a revered figure of many Muslims around the world, has further deepened the grief and outrage felt across the region. Such actions shock the conscience of humanity and constitute grave violation of international humanitarian law. Mr. President, these attacks were launched at a time when the Islamic Republic of Iran was actively and constructively engaged in diplomatic efforts regarding its peaceful nuclear program. Iran entered negotiations in good faith, fully committed to demonstrating the exclusively peaceful nature of its nuclear activities. On February 27th, just 1 day prior to the strikes, His Excellency Badr al-Busaidi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Oman, who had mediated several rounds of US-Iran talks, publicly indicated the significant progress had been achieved and described a major breakthrough. He stated that a peace agreement between the United States and Iran was within our reach, noting that a little bit more time needed to iron out some details during technical talks scheduled in Vienna. Thus, at the very moment when diplomacy was advancing and a mutually acceptable outcome was attainable, the United States and the Israeli regime once again chose coercion over dialogue. Iran has never abandoned the path of diplomacy. The international community will recall that it was the United States that unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA. In June 2025, the world witnessed that in the midst of diplomatic engagement and merely 2 days before the 6th round of talks in Oman, the Israeli regime and the United States launched unlawful and deliberate attacks against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities in blatant disregard for international law and the spirit of negotiation. Today, once again, diplomacy has been derailed through the unlawful use of force. We reiterate that this assault is not directed solely against Iran. It is an assault on international law, on the authority of the United Nations, and on the principles underlying the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. If a state party engaged in negotiations can be attacked with impunity, what message does this send to others? The Islamic Republic of Iran has never initiated aggression against any state. However, in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, Iran will continue to exercise its inherent right of self-defense for as long as this aggression persists. Those who initiated this unlawful use of force bear full responsibility for all its consequences. All states, particularly members of the NPT, as well as the Secretary General and the Security Council, have a clear responsibility under the Charter to condemn this unlawful act and to uphold international peace and security. Silence or inaction will only embolden further violations. Mr. President, with regard to the agenda of this meeting, during previous consultations, my delegation conveyed our substantive views on the final document of the forthcoming review conference. Today, we have taken note of your proposals on procedural and organizational adjustments to the working method of the 11th review conference, aimed at facilitating a successful outcome. We will provide detailed comments following consultation with our capital. At this stage, however, allow me to underline a general point. In our view, the lack of consensus at previous review conferences cannot be attributed to organizational arrangements, including the establishment or functioning of subsidiary bodies. The underlying cause have been political and geopolitical in nature. Chief among them is the continued absence of genuine political will on the part of nuclear weapon states to fully implement their obligation under Article 6 of the NPT. Moreover, recent developments have further eroded confidence in the treaty and its review process. Actions such as the unlawful attack of June 2025, as well as the ongoing attacks by the United States and the Israeli regime against Iran and its peaceful facilities, constitute serious violation of international law and gravely undermine the credibility and integrity of the NPT. In this context, any effort to ensure the success of the 11th Review Conference must address these substantive political challenges, rather than focusing solely on procedural modifications. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I now invite the distinguished representative of South Africa to be followed by Iraq.
Thank you very much, President-designate, and my delegation would add our voice of appreciation to others for you to schedule this briefing on the preparations and the proposed structure of the conference. It's needless to state that South Africa supports fully the NPT still as a cornerstone for the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. And we also like to reiterate the importance of the review conference and for it to recommit to the NPT and to a balanced implementation of its three pillars. I think it's obvious the state of geopolitics at the moment and the challenges we face. So, Chair, or President-designate, while we will still communicate and have been communicating some of our specific substantive priorities to you, I'd like to focus today maybe on your suggestions, which we find actually quite refreshing, and we would like to express our appreciation for you to try and see how better to organize our work during review conferences. I think the delegate before me from the Islamic Republic of Iran has a good point in the sense that changing the way that the RevCon operates does not necessarily mean that we will have success, but it does mean that we will do our work more efficiently. We will focus more and have more substantive discussions. And from that point of view, I think we need all the help we can get in terms of the current situation and to make sure that our work is organized in such a manner that we are able to engage fully all delegations in a transparent manner and a very inclusive manner. So we'd just like to express our appreciation for the transparent manner that you have conducted your business and the inclusive manner in which you've consulted and widely consulted. I think you've done as much as possible, and I know you are going to undertake some more engagements, and we look forward to also participate in those, but also to get feedback from what emanates. In terms of the proposed structure, South Africa has been one of those that has been advocating for looking at the way the conference is managed in a better structured way. So the main committees that you've mentioned in terms of them undertaking the substantive discussions, South Africa fully supports that. We think subsidiary bodies is useful when they play a role, but our experience has been that it's been largely a repetitive exercise with duplication in terms of statements, countries restating the same positions just in different bodies. And it also makes it more difficult for smaller delegations to participate. So in terms of focusing the discussions in the main committees would assist from our perspective. Also, in terms of the suggested topics, we appreciate the topics suggested, and we do feel that these are broad enough to enable a robust discussion and transparent discussions. And they also provide space for relevant issues to be raised for inclusion in the outcome document. And then your proposal to circulate a draft document, we'd fully support that. We'd see it as an absolute zero draft. It would not be influencing any positions either way, but we've had 3 prep comms. And for us to give meaning to those prep comms, it would be useful to draw from the broader general perspectives that have been accentuated there. I know there wasn't agreement on that and we couldn't adopt that, but that is fine. At least we do not start from anew when we come to the RefCon, and that we utilize those perspectives and views in your document. I think it's very useful. The 10th review conference, I think, tried to not do that and not have a draft, and it was painfully difficult for delegations to come up with something. And I think it forces us then as delegations to take matters in our own hand and start drafting documents on our own, which I think we need to avoid. We have a good structure. We have a good bureau. The president-designate has put forward some very valuable and useful measures for us, and I think the outcome document can fully be supported. We take note of the Arab group's concern about subsidiary bodies, and I'm pretty sure somewhere we will be able to find each other on this. But if a subsidiary body is set up, it needs to have worth, it needs to contribute to the process, and it needs to contribute to transparency and inclusion as well. Too much we've experienced in the past, do we sit and discuss behind closed doors and in small groups outcomes and considerations. And I know this negotiations work this way, that eventually that's where you do cut the deals. But we need to keep this as open and transparent and inclusive as possible. So again, thank you for adhering to that call. Thank you for your efforts, and please be assured of South Africa's full support for your presidency and also the success of the 11th Review Conference. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa, and I now invite the distinguished permanent representative of Iraq to be followed by Egypt.
First, let me congratulate you, Ambassador, for assuming the presidency of NPT Review Conference and assure you of our full support in the discharge of your responsibility and achieving a successful outcome for the conference. I also would like to express our appreciation for your active engagement in all regional consultations conducted in preparation for the review conference, including the MENA region consultation held in Amman back in January. Also would like to align ourselves in Iraq with the statement delivered by our colleague from Algeria on behalf of the Arab group. We reaffirm that the establishment of the Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction remain a national and regional priority that can't be postponed, and a core element of the full and non-selective implementation of the objective of Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, in line with 1995 resolution on the Middle East. We stress the importance of ensuring that the outcome of the review conference reflect the priorities and concerns of all state parties, including those relevant or related to the Middle East. We also underscore the importance of maintaining a strong focus on nuclear disarmament as a core objective of the treaty, and stress the need for a full and effective implementation of Article 6 and the commitment of the commitment by nuclear weapon states to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. In this context, we note the ongoing consultation on the organizational work of review conference, including the proposal that consultation on issues traditionally addressed within subsidiary two bodies be shifted to the framework of the main committee. We underline the importance of establishing subsidiary bodies as an essential framework for addressing regionally sensitive matters in a focused, substantive, and dedicated manner, including issues of particular relevance to the Middle East. Finally, in this regard, we underscore the importance of preserving mechanisms that ensure the effective and focused consideration of the establishment of a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, allowing for meaningful and dedicated deliberation on this priority issue. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iraq. I now invite the distinguished representative of Egypt to be followed by Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Excellency, Mr. President-designate. Egypt aligns itself with the intervention delivered earlier by Algeria on behalf of the Arab group and reiterate our full support to the President-designate, Ambassador Hong Viet, particularly as a president from the non-aligned movement. Egypt nominated itself as a vice president to demonstrate further commitment to the success of the conference and its presidency. We profoundly appreciate the efforts and active endeavors of the President-designate in engaging and consulting with states parties, including at the regional level, such as the useful regional consultations for the MENA region held 7 and 8 January in Amman, Jordan. We take note of your visit to Vienna and a number of nuclear weapon states, as well as a participation in key disarmament and non-proliferation fora. Mr. President-designate, we consider that a consensual substantive outcome document is a key to and indispensable for the success of the REFCON. While we can be open-minded about the multiple formats that the outcome document can follow, it is imperative that this outcome document be balanced and equitable in addressing the 3 pillars under the treaty without selectivity or discrimination, and in a manner that reflects recognition to the significant lack of progress under the disarmament pillar. Any outcome document needs to reaffirm existing international obligations, including on nuclear disarmament, and developing them further. Collectively, we must not allow for any backsliding or retrogression. We welcome the intention of the President-designate to commence consultations on the draft outcome document as early as mid-second week of the review conference. There is a wide recognition of the difficulties resulting from the current geopolitical situation and their adverse impact on the REFCON. However, the invitation to embrace necessary pragmatism and realism should not be introduced or considered as an antithesis to progress and ambition. Mr. President-designate, during the Amman consultations, as well as the open-ended consultations last October and the consultations with an unaligned movement in November last year, Egypt, and also as part of the Arab group, laid out their priorities and areas of interest, namely achieving the universality of the treaty, particularly in the Middle East, accelerating and strengthening the implementation of nuclear disarmament obligations under Article 6, the Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone, further empowering the states parties to benefit from the inalienable right to peaceful uses, and achieving progress on transparency and accountability by nuclear weapon states. The establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East is an advanced priority, and the 1995 resolution on the Middle East was basis for the indefinite extension of the NPT. We expect the REFCON to renew its resolve to reaffirm the commitment to the implementation of the 1995 resolution and the responsibility of the 3 co-sponsors, and to acknowledge the positive contributions by the annual UN conference on establishing a zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Sir President-designate, as for your proposal on the structure of the conference, including giving up on subsidiary bodies, we understand and respect the considerations behind the President's proposal, and we certainly value the commitment to efficiency and inclusiveness, while noting that previous failures at the REFCON were due to the lack of political will and not due to organizational or procedural considerations. We joined the Arab group in its views about the major importance of the retention of the subsidiary bodies. The subsidiary bodies and the time and the space they accord to specific issues are an important political signal about the commitment of the REFCON towards these matters of particular importance. We anticipate that cancelling the SBs can be a counterproductive step. The subsidiary bodies, since their inception, pursuant to Decision 1 of the 1995 Review and Indefinite Extension Conference, have managed to provide positive contribution, including in the context of elaborating the outcome document. The focus needs to be on how to fully harness the potential of the SBs and improve their deliverables and their time management. Having said that, we invite the President-designate to kindly revisit this proposal about the organizational structure of the conference. To conclude, Egypt would like to inform that its views and details will be explained as part of the working paper to be presented by the Arab group this week, as well as another working paper that will be submitted by Ireland on behalf of the New Agenda Coalition, in addition to the 8 working papers by the Non-Aligned Movement. I thank you, Mr. President-designate.
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe to be followed by Timor-Leste.
Zimbabwe thanks the President-designate, Your Excellency Ambassador Dong Hang Viet, for convening these informal consultations with all state parties ahead of the 11th NPT Review Conference. We appreciate the extensive consultations and outreach by the President-designate, including the African regional consultations held in Addis Ababa in November 2025. President-designate, the 2026 NPT Review Conference occurs at a critical juncture when concerns are heightened around the need for sustained nuclear disarmament and concrete steps towards the total elimination of nuclear weapons. At the same time, the grand bargain of the NPT requires facilitation of access to the benefits of peaceful uses of nuclear technology to the global south. We further underscore the need for adequate focus on the critical importance of nuclear weapon-free zones, including the implementation of the 1995 Review and Extension Conference decision on the establishment of the Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. President-designate, we welcome your proposals on specific thematic focus by the main committees. As much as possible, meetings conducted in full plenary mode would allow for broader participation and conditions necessary to generate consensus. This approach helps avoid past experiences of overlapping schedules. We also note that, as has been the case in previous review conferences, some of the main committee meetings could be conducted in informal mode for frank discussions. President-designate, Zimbabwe supports every effort to ensure that the 2026 NPT Review Conference arrives at a consensus outcome that will marshal state parties towards the implementation of treaty obligations and agreed outcomes of previous review conferences. We have full confidence in your leadership and assure you of our constructive engagement. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe, and I now invite the distinguished permanent representative of Timor-Leste.
Mr. President-designate, Excellencies. At the outset, Timor-Leste warmly welcomes Ambassador Dong Hung Viet, permanent representative of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, as the President-designate of the 2026 Review Conference of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of the Nuclear Weapons. We trust your leadership and stand ready to support your chairmanship in a spirit of cooperation to achieve a meaningful, balanced outcome. Mr. President-designate, we convene at a moment of profound uncertainty. Geopolitical tensions are intensifying, and nuclear rhetoric has reemerged in ways many believe were confined to history. We underscore the fragility of the political groundwork before us, but we believe under your leadership we will be able to achieve a consensus outcome in the future. For Timor-Leste, the NPT remains the cornerstones of global security. Its credibility depends on tangible progress across its 3 mutually reinforcing pillars: disarmament, non-proliferation, and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Mr. President-designate, moving forward, we would like to highlight some essential points. First, we believe we must restore consensus on the integrity of the three pillars. This requires a candid acknowledgement of the deteriorating security environment and a reaffirmation of past commitments, specifically Article 6. Second, we also believe that we must bridge the credibility gap in disarmament. Non-nuclear weapon states see a widening distance between commitments and implementation. We must advance concrete steps on risk reduction and transparency. Dialogue must not cease. Third, we also believe that we must stabilize the review process. The inability to react recent recommendations signals a need for renewed engagement. The treaty's strength relies on the integrity of its process. Fourth, we also believe that the non-proliferation regime must be reinforced. We must unequivocally reaffirm the norm against nuclear threats and coercion while safeguarding or ensuring safeguards remain robust and impartial. Fifth, Mr. President-designate, we believe that progress on peaceful uses of a development imperative. For many developing countries, such as Timor-Leste, equitable access to nuclear technology for health, agriculture, and climate resilience is essential. This is a matter of fairness and equity. Expanded technical cooperation and inclusive participation in nuclear governance can serve as areas of constructive consensus. Finally, Mr. President-designate, success depends on our ability to rebuild political bridges. We must create space for genuine dialogue and focus on our shared interest, that is, safeguarding humanity's future. As a young nation, Timor-Leste understands the power of principled engagement. Our history teaches us that durable peace is built through patience, compromise, and respect for international law. We look forward to 2026 under your leadership, committed to an action-oriented outcome that restores confidence in the NPT and advances our common aspirations for a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Timor-Leste. I now invite the distinguished representative of Mexico to be followed by Brazil.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your briefing and for the opportunity to share our views. From Mexico's perspective, a third consecutive review conference without an agreed outcome would undoubtedly represent a setback for multilateral nuclear disarmament diplomacy. At the same time, the treaty itself is not in peril. The vast majority of states parties remain firmly committed to its implementation, and this continued adherence is a strength that should be recognized and built upon. In this regard, we believe it is essential to focus on those issues that require sustained attention and forward-looking engagement, particularly the disarmament obligations under Article 6, in order to reinforce confidence in the treaty and strengthen its implementation, even in challenging times. With respect to your proposed program of work, we support the allocation of focused debates. We have consistently advocated for addressing transparency and accountability measures of the nuclear weapon states within Main Committee 1, as these are central to rebuilding trust and credibility in the review process. At the same time, we do not oppose your proposal to address issues related to strengthening the review process in Main Committee 3. Regarding subsidiary bodies, Mexico considers them potentially valuable spaces for more in-depth and constructive discussions on specific issues. However, past experience has shown that their effectiveness depends on having clearly defined mandates and objectives. Subsidiary bodies should not duplicate debates taking place elsewhere, but rather contribute concretely to advancing negotiations. Provided they are task-oriented and results-driven, they can be a useful tool. We also welcome the possibility of working on a rolling text at an early stage and trust that consultations on the draft outcome document will be conducted in a transparent and timely manner. Finally, we associate ourselves with and agree with the reviews expressed by the delegation of South Africa. Mr. President, You can count on the full support and constructive engagement of the Mexican delegation as we work together toward a successful review conference. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Brazil to be followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, President-designate, for your briefing on the preparation for the review process. This will be a challenging process, but we are confident that under your capable leadership and with the cooperation of all delegations, we can achieve a valuable outcome. Brazil also appreciates the extensive consultations you have been carrying out. We look forward to hearing more about your future consultations. As with previous review conference, Brazil is ready to collaborate to ensure that we produce a consensual outcome document that builds on the NPT acquis, respects previous commitments, and provides forward-looking recommendations that truly address today's needs in light of the security risks we are witnessing. In this regard, we hope to contribute to balanced discussions aimed at closing the implementation gap between the three pillars of the NPT. We must make progress on nuclear disarmament, and there must be concrete and effective discussions and recommendations on transparency and accountability. We must be prepared to reaffirm our commitments to non-proliferation in accordance with the principles of international law, the UN Charter, and the fundamental principles enshrined in the NPT, while respecting the inalienable rights of NPT member states to develop nuclear technology for non-prescribed purposes. Regarding the specific matter of the subsidiary bodies, my capital is still considering your proposal, and we acknowledge the concerns raised by other delegations that require further consideration. However, at this early stage, we are prepared to consider proposals that provide delegations with opportunities for open and constructive dialogue and allow more time for negotiations. In this regard, we thank you for providing information that we intend to share the first drafts to negotiations on the beginning of the second week. Like other delegations, we believe that duplication should be avoided, particularly given the small size of several delegations, as well as the establishment of meeting settings that encourage repetition of positions rather than actual negotiations. We are aware of the constraints, and we want that this RevCon is used as a platform for negotiations in good faith, resulting in an outcome that meets the seriousness of this moment. We need to recommit, and we need to advance. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil. I now invite the distinguished representative of Indonesia to be followed by Australia.
Thank you, President-designate, for convening this meeting and your comprehensive briefing. Indonesia appreciates your extensive efforts as well as your transparent and inclusive approach. We are deeply concerned by the deteriorating global security environment that continue to erode confidence and undermining the prospect for a constructive and successful review conference. Nevertheless, this challenging context should also serve as an opportunity for all state parties to recommit politically to the NPT and to demonstrate renewed determinations. We welcome your proposed structure for the conference aimed at fostering more targeted and efficient discussions, as well as your intentions for the early introductions of the draft outcome documents to facilitate negotiations. At the same time, we stress the importance of ensuring that the proposed organizational structures provides adequate time and appropriate avenues to address issues of interest to all member states in a balanced, interactive, and substantive manner. We take note of expectations and challenges you have identified through your consultations. While recognizing the obstacles ahead, we stand ready to support your effort toward achieving a balanced and substantive outcomes in all three pillars, including on issues of long-standing interest to my delegations and others delegations, such as verifiable disarmament measures, greater transparency and accountability, negative security assurances, the inalienable rights for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy without discriminations, and the issue of emerging technologies in these armaments, including artificial intelligence. At the same time, we urge that be no backtracking on past commitments, including those related to nuclear testing. Reaffirming existing obligations would constitute an important confidence-building measures. Mr. President-designate, my delegation stands ready to support your efforts toward a credible, balanced, and substantive outcome of the 2026 review conference. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia. I now invite the distinguished representative of Australia to be followed by Thailand.
Thank you, President-designate, and I'd like to join other colleagues in expressing my delegation's appreciation for all of your extensive work to date and for providing a very clear overview as well as a proposed way forward. I should preface my remarks by saying that Capital will need to look at this closely and consider the implications, but I just wanted to share some initial reactions. And I think the distinguished representative from South Africa put it quite well and said a lot that we would agree with. I mean, certainly, I think on the subsidiary bodies, we would have concerns around duplicative discussions and whether this is an efficient use of our time. So certainly, I think we would be supportive of innovative approaches, looking at how we can better address this. In terms of the topics that you proposed, I, of course, don't yet have reflections from Capital on these, but I think at face value, they look to be quite sensible. I think we would be interested in just understanding how the structured thematic dialogue would function in practice, and I guess how this would be different to the subsidiary bodies and how we would be able to avoid the duplication that we already see under the subsidiary bodies in these dialogues. In terms of sharing an outcome document at an earlier stage, I think this is something that my delegation could fully support. I think greater time to discuss the document and to negotiate can only be useful. And I should say, and I think that you had already made this very clear to us, President-designate, but of course we don't see, these structural changes or these changes in working methods as a silver bullet. But it's very clear that we do need to, take a different approach if we want to see a different outcome at this review conference. So with that, we'll certainly provide further views once Canberra has had an opportunity to consider, but at the moment, please consider us to be very open to what you're proposing. So thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Thailand to be followed by Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. President-designate, for convening this informal consultation and for your continued efforts to steer our preparation. Let me begin by expressing Thailand's strong support for your approach and principles you have outlined. We appreciate your emphasis on openness, transparency, and inclusivity, and your determination to pursue a balanced and substantive outcome. You can count on our full support. I wish to offer some perspectives from Thailand. We meet at a moment of heightened tensions. The recent escalation in the Middle East is a reminder that the risk of nuclear conflict is not a theory, but our daily reality. In this context, nuclear weapon states have a special responsibility under Article 6 to pursue good faith negotiations on disarmament and ending the nuclear arms race. Thailand sees three priorities where progress is essential. First, negative security assurances. Legally binding NSAs from nuclear weapon states remain our highest priority. For ASEAN, this commitment is operationalized through the Schonfest Protocol. Second, risk reduction. This is neither a substitute nor a prerequisite for disarmament, but a complement to it, especially in today's threat environment. We see practical measures such as transparency, standardized reporting, and crisis communication as areas where convergence is possible. Third, we must make progress on nuclear weapon-free zones in the Middle East. This is not just a diplomatic goal, it is a security imperative for the region and the world. On process, we welcome your proposal on structured and focused discussions in the main committees. Thailand also welcomes the early circulation of the draft outcome document and is open-minded on the format, provided it delivers meaningful progress on NSAs, transparency, and balanced implementation of all three NPT pillars. There should be no backtracking of existing commitments. We also encourage the regional issues, especially the Middle East, receive the dedicated attention it deserves. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Thailand, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Ireland to be followed by Malaysia.
Thank you very much, President Designate. I have to commend you very much on the pragmatic clarity with which you're approaching our preparations. It's very useful to hear your more detailed vision for the review conference today. And Ireland is certainly very grateful to you and to your team for the very industrious approach to preparing us and for the extensive travel that you've done to consult widely. I think needless to say that we're very much in need of all the preparatory work that we can get and the realistic grasp that you clearly have of the problems. I can't but agree with you, President Designate, about the very difficult and concerning developments we've seen on international peace and security. In recent days and weeks, ongoing conflicts have an extremely worrying nuclear dimension in multiple instances now. And while that may further complicate our approach to finding consensus, it has made the functioning and the endurance of the NPT all the more important beyond this review conference. President Designate, I believe you've summarized very well the spectrum of the concerns that states parties have articulated across all three pillars. We very much agree with you that the credibility of the treaty depends on progress on Article 6 by the nuclear weapon states in particular. Similarly, on your identification of the need for more transparency and increased accountability through a more effective dialogue and enhanced reporting, in particular by the nuclear weapon states on their national reports. As you know, Ireland will contribute to, will look to be constructive and help you on that point. With the deadline yesterday for submission of working papers, together with Switzerland and New Zealand, we've provided our updated approach on that and look forward to the publication soon. We also hope to work with all states, in particular the nuclear weapon states, on advancing that effort. And as my dear distinguished colleague from Egypt has mentioned, Ireland is serving as the rotating chair for the new Agenda Coalition for the first half of the year. So we also look forward to working together with our NAC partners to help you to progress the priorities on disarmament and strengthening the review process, in particular during the RevCon. And just moving to your specific proposals, thank you very much for the clear and precise approach you've set out. While there may be some potential uses for convening subsidiary bodies at the review conference, some of which I think were well advanced near the end of PrepCon 3, we can very much appreciate the specificity of your vision, and we share the wish, your wish to find a way to make our time more productive, however that can be done. If the subsidiary bodies are not convened without such a dedicated mechanism for more informal discussions that might advance us past the impasses and the circular discussions that we have, the structured thematic dialogues you've suggested would be essential. They could provide a means of ensuring that states parties don't simply repeat known positions in multiple formats. Certainly, we'd agree that we must have dedicated discussions on the implementation of Article 6, and we hope that this may even go some way to beginning an institutionalized approach to ensuring a dialogue on this particular topic for future cycles. I also offer you Ireland's full support for the dedicated discussion on the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East and the full implementation of the 1995 decision. The present security environment illustrates just how important that is for the NPT as a whole, and your proposal responds to the demands of a huge number of states parties on a cross-regional basis, including Ireland and the European Union's long-standing priorities. We also support your proposed discussion on measures to prevent nuclear war. As strong supporters of the independent UN panel convened to study the effects of nuclear war, we'd be interested in ensuring that some of those perspectives are included. I'd ask President-designate that, given the breadth of this topic, if you have given thought to providing guiding questions or a more structured framework for this dialogue, and whether the independent panel or the chair of the panel might usefully contribute in some way to that. And while on the dialogues, I have a further question regarding the planned dialogues on SRP, strengthening the review process. In particular, will these discussions have specific content, or will states parties be free to shape the approach or what they see as a useful subject matter for this topic? And finally, Chair, just let me reiterate Ireland's really deep appreciation for your work and your approach to the review conference, as well as your clear understanding of the urgency and importance of the need to find a positive outcome. You can be assured, as always, of our full support. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ireland, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Malaysia to be followed by the Republic of Korea.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President Designate, for holding this informal consultation, which we find very helpful in sensitizing us on the outcome of the series of engagements you have intensively done in the past few months, as well as your priorities and plans for the 11th NPT Review Conference. We join other colleagues in this room and congratulate you again on taking up this important role. We have full confidence in you and your team in steering this process towards a successful outcome of the review conference. Please be assured of Malaysia's full support and cooperation. Amid heightened geopolitical tensions, it is essential that we preserve and reinforce the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation architecture with the NPT as its central pillar. Following 2 consecutive NPT review conferences that were unable to agree on an outcome document, renewed political will and sustained engagement by all state parties are urgently needed to safeguard the treaty's credibility and integrity and to ensure the regime remains fit for purpose in an increasingly volatile global environment. We are supportive of the proposal to reduce parallel meetings to ensure that the discussions remain inclusive and focused without straining the resources of state parties. It is important to underscore that the success of the review conference should not be measured by the quantity of meetings and engagements, but by the quality of inclusive and substantive deliberations, ensuring meaningful and balanced participation by all state parties, ultimately directed toward a fruitful outcome. Malaysia also underscores the importance of no backsliding on previous commitments while pursuing near-term, concrete, implementable, and achievable measures to be delivered within the next review cycle. Malaysia welcomes the plan to circulate the draft outcome document in the middle of the second week of the NPT review conference, as this will allow ample time for substantive deliberation, consultation, and debate among state parties. The early zero draft could be based on working papers and input provided by state parties during the past preparatory committee sessions. To conclude, I would like to again reaffirm Malaysia's support to your work, Mr. President-designate, toward a successful outcome of the 11th NPT review conference. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malaysia. I now call upon the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President-designate. At the outset, allow me to express our deep appreciation for your leadership in guiding our work. We share the broad recognition that at a time when the global disarmament regime is facing profound challenges, the importance of a successful NPT review conference has never been greater. The NPT remains the cornerstone of the international nuclear non-proliferation regime and as an essential foundation for advancing nuclear disarmament and the peaceful use of nuclear energy in a balanced manner. Notably, the DPRK's continued development of its nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles programs constitutes one of the most serious threats to the integrity and the credibility of the NPT regime. Such actions not only undermine regional and international security, but also erode the authority and universality of the global non-proliferation regime. Taking this opportunity, let me reiterate the Republic of Korea places the highest priority on addressing these challenges posed by the DPRK. In order to safeguard the NPT regime and to ensure a substantive and successful outcome of this review conference, the Republic of Korea stands ready to work closely and constructively with you, Mr. President-designate. With regard to the ideas and plans that you suggested today, we'll consult with the capital and give some feedback if necessary. We'll also engage actively with all state parties to build common ground and help restore confidence in this vital regime. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea, and I now invite the distinguished permanent observer of the League of Arab States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me start by thanking you for the excellent role that you are playing since you have been selected as a president-designate for the conference and for the principles of transparency, neutrality, and inclusiveness that you have been following all along. I speak here today not only as a permanent observer of the League of Arab States, but as someone who attended almost all review conferences started from 1980 up till today. And this is going to be my last Review Conference. So bear with me if I share with you some assessments of what you said based on the past experience that I had in all these years. Let me start by supporting the statement by Algeria on behalf of the League of the Arab States and of the Arab Group, I'm sorry, and all the Arab statements that have been made. First point is that I agree with you wholeheartedly about the importance of having a successful conference and the need to have a final outcome. The most important question we ask is how? In the midst of the current geopolitical struggle, the war in Ukraine is still on, the war that resulted in the postponement of the last conference in 2022 from January till August, and there is no prospect in sight. Add to it the new war that just erupted in the Middle East and the Iranian unjustified attacks on Arab countries and particularly in the Gulf and the vicinity, claiming that it is in exercise of Article 51 of the Charter about self-defense. The Arab country did not kill the Iranian leadership. It did not destroy the Iranian properties or the Iranian civilian infrastructure. It did not attack the Iranian people. And Iran should understand that this action is action contrary to its interest in the Middle East. It is Israel that attacked, and Iran should have replied back in exercise of Article 51 against Israel, not attacking Arab countries, including the Sultanate of Oman, which the representative of Iran just said that they were very gracious to host and to supervise the negotiations on the JCPOA and with the United States, the latest of which was in Geneva. This is totally unacceptable from the Arab side. But this is a political issue. I don't want to enter into any political discussion here because it is out of the scope of the NPT. What is the scope of what is at stake here is the importance of the last war that just erupted that would push us to establish a subsidiary body in the conference. Because absent a subsidiary body, we will not be able to agree what are we going to do next with the 1995 review conference resolution that was adopted as a part of the indefinite extension of the treaty. Let me tell you a very personal reflection that might not have any relation to the League of Arab States. It is that if this conference is failed, and with the continuation of what is happening, this might push us to go back on our agreement on the indefinite extension resolution. So we will come back to the conference to have a review conference every 5 years to renew the treaty. And if we like the next renewal, we will do it. If we don't like it, we are not going to do it. We are not benefiting as Arab countries from the NPT. We had the resolution in 1995. We had another document in 2010 deciding to convene a conference in 2012. Some big powers in this room and or outside prevented this conference from happening. So we have a conference in the General Assembly. Having a conference in the General Assembly does not relieve the NPT from its responsibility regarding the implementation of the 1995 resolution. And this has to be very clear. It will be clear in the document that's going to be circulated by the Arab countries. And it is clear in many of the documents that you will receive from NAM, from other groupings that have, we have gone a big shot in that. But the problem is that Israel does not attend. And one other superpower does not attend. And we are dealing with that's why I really appreciated the resolutions by the first committee last year to establish an expert group on how to strengthen the nuclear weapon-free zones and how to establish the nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. This is a collective effort. It is not either or effort, and it is not one side against the other. So that's why I will call on you again to postpone the decision related to not to have a subsidiary body in main committee 2 regarding the Middle East, particularly the Middle East. I'm concerned about that. But until we see how the situation is going to go, how the current struggle in the region is going to settle, where these negotiations or lack of negotiations or military actions are going to take us. So this is one point. Second point is that I highly salute your direction to present a draft outcome document early on. And that is, but this draft outcome document, I'm sure it's going to be based on recommendations or paragraphs or drafts that are going to be submitted by member states. So I think that we will need to establish also a drafting structure early on, before the start of the conference. If you are going to present this in the second week, we must begin at least 1 month ahead to start collecting from member states what do they want to see in the document. We have different types of document. In 2000, for instance, in disarmament, we had the 10 concrete steps. In 2010, we had the document divided into 4 sections, and we had, I think, 56 action agenda. So what type of document are you looking at? Commitments, action agenda, general paragraphs? That is also important to hear and to negotiate and to discuss in maybe a further meeting, not today. I'm just asking the question. And also, are the regional issues will remain to be a separate part in that document? Regional issues has always been a separate part, even though I didn't like the fact that in past conferences, the regional issues have been shared between the Middle East and North Korea. 2 different cases and 2 unrelated cases. So we need to discuss that, whether it will remain a separate, and we would certainly like to be remaining a separate, and maybe we can have a separate part related only to the Middle East, if that is needed. The fact that we are now in a war that could be expanding to the whole area, I think it just justify this part of action. The third point is related to the discussions on strengthening the review process. And here I must say that it is absolutely time that the MPT establishes a follow-up mechanism or a secretariat. It is sad to see that an organization like CTBT, a treaty that has not yet entered into force, is having a secretariat of about 400 to 500 people that is following up the implementation in thematic and on the ground of every single provision of what is being worked on. A treaty that is not in force. MPT has been in force since 1968. And we have no secretariat. We have nobody to follow. I don't want you to look to your left, because the UN cannot follow the implementation of the provisions with the P5 and with the disarmament machinery and with all those kind of things. We have to establish our own mechanism and to establish our own secretariat. And the NAM has already presented hundreds of papers on this. Since 1995, we have been calling in the non-aligned movement for the establishment of a secretariat and of a, or if not a secretariat, you will tell me financial considerations. I'll tell you not a secretariat. Follow-up mechanism, a meeting 2 times every year or 1 time a year to discuss where are we with the implementation of this treaty and of the provisions that we spend many hours drafting here in the United Nations. So this is also an important issue I want you to have to pay attention to. In your brilliant statement, I didn't hear anything about your consultations with the P5. And the P5 are essential. We can't have a successful conference in this in the NPT without the P5. And the P5 used to adopt a resolution in the Security Council about negative security assurances in conjunction with each and every NPT review conference, except the last one in 2022 because of the Ukraine war. So is this going to be continuing? Are the P5 in a situation to adopt a negative security assurances resolution from the Security Council, giving assurances to all of us as non-nuclear weapon states here? Or are they going to keep us guessing when and where are they going to use their nuclear weapons? This also needs to be very clearly stated to the nuclear weapon states, and I hope from those who are sitting here to convey it. It cannot be that the geopolitical struggle that is happening is damaging this treaty and leading it to a different fate that we do not want. I'm glad you mentioned the issue of the last point, the issue of measures to prevent nuclear war. I remember the General Assembly established a working group, an expert group last year exactly for that. And maybe it is a good idea to have a discussion with some members or the chair of the expert group on that topic on the margins of the NPT review conference. Exactly like it is important to have a discussion with the chair of the expert group on the nuclear weapon-free zones and the Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone. These are going to enrich our knowledge and to help us in shaping the final outcome document that we aspire will be successful and will be adopted under your brilliant leadership. I'm sorry that I've taken the floor for long, but these are very essential remarks that I wanted to say at this juncture. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the League of Arab States, and I now invite the representative of Austria.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, President-designate. Austria would like to join other member states in congratulating you for your efforts and by thanking you for inviting us to this briefing. Please rest assured of Austria's full support as you guide us towards the review conference in April. Colleagues, we meet at a profoundly concerning moment for global peace and security. We all know that nuclear risks are higher than ever, and the international system, including multilateralism and the UN Charter, is under growing strain. This weekend, we have witnessed yet another worrying escalation, which only reinforces our concerns. These concerns extend to today's nuclear risk environment that is characterized by multiple flashpoints with potential for nuclear escalation and blatant violations of international law. What is the NPT's role in all of this, we may ask? Well, President-designate, as you are aware and as we are all aware, dear colleagues, it has now been 15 years since the NPT achieved an agreed outcome. We are afraid to say that this is not really the sign of a healthy treaty. Failures to adopt the final document do not affect the treaty's legal validity, but it reflects its prolonged inability to reach agreement, and this undermines cohesion and confidence in the NPT regime. This inability of the review conferences to produce agreed outcomes shows that the way we are doing things is not really working. New ideas are needed to reinvigorate the credibility of the process. And therefore, Mr. President-designate, we have listened very carefully to the proposals you outlined today for, big structural innovation. Given the scope of the organizational changes envisaged, we will need to consult in Vienna and come back to you with a more detailed position. As Austria approaches the 2026 review conference, we have a clear aim: to safeguard the multilateral disarmament and non-proliferation regime with the NPT at its core, and to move beyond business as usual in the light of current nuclear risks. To advance this aim, Austria has also presented its nomination as one of the vice presidents of the review conference, and we look forward to engaging with all member states. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you very much, Chair Designate, for giving me the floor. I would like to join previous speakers and share my appreciation and our gratefulness for the profound and very intense outreach and consultations you have done in the last couple of weeks and months. And I want to assure you also of our full support for doing the REFCON. I would like to underline again, as far as it's of utmost importance to preserve the NPT. It does provide secure benefits for all of us, and a world without the NPT would be a very different and definitely not a better one. It is a success story. At the REFCON, it is now paramount to reflect on the benefits and value of the NPT, and that should be our starting point when working towards a very successful outcome of the REFCON. And there are numerous issues with broad support, and we heard it today in the room too. Strengthening the review process, including accountability and transparency, verification, risk reduction, FMCT, CTBT. And with Germany, we will continue being engaged in bridge-building initiatives to move forward on these issues. It might be the Stockholm Initiative, the NPDI, or the group reducing the risk of nuclear conflict. We will also share a couple of working papers on that matter. On your proposals today, I would like to share our very much appreciation. Berlin is assessing them currently, and we will come back to you. But also would like to applaud your creativity. This is particularly in these times very much important to think outside the box. And I would, in that regard, also like to support very much the initial thoughts from Australia and also South Africa on that matter. And I would like to particularly underline that we very much appreciate that the early commencement of negotiations in the second week. Let me conclude. Thank you again very much for this informal consultations, for meeting up today. I hope there are other opportunities before the REFCON to do so, and rest assured of our full support. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany. I now invite the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador, taking the floor in my national capacity as a very brief comment on reaction. I think there were 3 delegations that have expressed some support of not having subsidiary bodies, and because there is some kind of duplication between discussion with the main committees. So with the UN main organs, we do have subsidiary bodies. Is it a reason to not have subsidiary bodies? Because we do have sometimes duplications. They want to trigger bad ideas, and with the financial constraints, some may think it's a good idea to also just consult those subsidiary bodies. But I think maybe it's an issue of guidance. Perhaps you could provide more guidance under discussion within the main, under the subsidiary bodies. Discussion on more difficult issues could be left for those I would say, maybe behind closed doors, but for member states to discuss more frankly, and for the main committee could be left for more general debate. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Yemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join our colleagues in expressing our full support to you. And regarding the issue of the subsidiary body on the Middle East and the resolution 1995, Mr. President, today, as the Middle East once again witnesses dangerous military escalation, including direct confrontation involving Israel, United States, and Iran, we are reminded in the most alarming way that the absence of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the region is not a theoretical concern. It is a real and urgent security gap. Maintaining a subsidiary body within the review conference serves several vital purposes. It institutionalizes focused dialogue on regional security arrangements. It ensures accountability, continuity across review cycles. It signals that the international community remains committed to a concrete negotiated outcome, not merely theoretical support. So, at a time when tensions are escalating and military operations are unfolding in the region, abandoning or downgrading this track would send the wrong message. Instead, we must reinforce it. So we are confident, Excellency, that you will do your best to keep the subsidiary body regarding the Middle East free zone as before in the previous conferences. Thank you, Excellency.
I thank the distinguished representative of Yemen, and I now invite the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President, and sorry for taking the floor again. In response to concerns raised by the distinguished observer representative of the League of Arab States, I would like to clarify that the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran are targeting exclusively United States military bases and assets, and not the interests of neighboring and brotherly countries in our region. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iran. I have now exhausted the list of speakers I do not see any other request for the floor. I would like to ask the Secretariat to read out any questions or comments that we have received in the chat, if there's any. I'm informed that there is no comment or questions in the chat. I will then turn to the third item of our agenda today, which is to hear an administrative update by the Secretariat. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning to all states parties in the room and those of you online. On that note, I did want to make mention of the somewhat unique modalities that we have in place for this particular consultations. Unfortunately, we were unable to have a properly hybrid meeting. Obviously, in the spirit of transparency and inclusivity, it was very important to enable delegates in other cities, and particularly capitals, to be able to at least engage with these consultations in some way. Therefore, we ended up having in-person in New York, with it being webcast and the chat open for questions and comments. So my apologies for any confusion on that, but as I said, this is a very unique set of modalities. I wanted to move very quickly to some of the procedural aspects related to the RevCon. First, the election of officers. As one of its first actions, the RevCon will elect its president, vice presidents, and committee chairs. The president of the review conference the conference will confirm the election upon its opening. And then the rules of procedure call for the election of 34 vice presidents. To date, we have received a total of 22 nominations for vice presidents. 10 of those nominations are from the group of non-aligned states parties, 10 are from the group of Western European and other states, and 2 are from the group of Eastern European states parties. The conference will also elect a chair and 2 vice chairs for each main committee, the drafting committee, and the credentials committee. As states parties are already aware, main committee 1 will be chaired by Ambassador Samuel Yakuma of Ghana. Main committee 2 will be chaired by Ambassador Kairat Umarov of Kazakhstan, and main committee 3 will be chaired by Ambassador Pekka Pustinen of Finland. We have not received any nominations for the 2 positions of vice chairs for both main committees 1 and 2. We have received nominations for the 2 positions of vice chair for main committee 3. We have not received any nominations for the chair or vice chairs of the drafting committee. As states parties will be aware, the chair of the drafting committee traditionally goes to the group of Eastern European states. We have received a nomination for the chair and 1 vice chair of the credentials committee. That means there is still 1 vice chair spot available for the credentials committee. Moving to the schedule of work, at its 3rd session, the preparatory committee adopted the draft provisional agenda for the review conference. It also adopted the draft decision on the allocation of items to the main committees. The draft proposed program of work, which will contain the schedule of meetings for the RevCon, will be circulated to states parties prior to the review conference. In terms of the website, I want to make it clear that there are 2 websites dedicated to the review conference. The first is the traditional review conference website, which is very much a public-facing website on the un.org domain. And that contains logistical and background information related to the NPT and the review conference. The URL for that website was circulated to states parties on 25 February. The English version of that website is now live, and the versions in the other official languages are currently under development and will be made available in due course. The second website is on the ODA Meetings Place portal, which I suspect is more familiar to most delegates. As was the case in the preceding meetings of the preparatory committee, all documents and statements of the conference will be uploaded on Meetings Place. There are going to be many links directing delegates from the un.org website to the Meetings Place website to avoid confusion, and the Secretariat will ensure that all information and documentation needed can be found on both websites. The information note entitled Information for States Parties, Observer States and Intergovernmental Organizations, bearing the symbol npt/conf.2026/inf./1 has been issued and uploaded to the 2 websites of the review conference. I need to flag a few deadlines. Applications to request rooms for side events and spaces for exhibitions were due by the 2nd of March. Any delegation wishing to organise side events and exhibitions that have not yet applied for spaces are requested to do so as soon as possible. Spaces may continue to be allocated on an as available basis. While we will continue to do our best to accommodate your side event requests, please kindly note that available space is very limited. In this regard, we would be grateful for delegations to demonstrate flexibility and propose alternative dates if needed. The calendars for side events and exhibitions will be published on our websites in the next few weeks. The deadline for documentation, such as working papers and national reports, was also the 2nd of March. While delegations can continue to submit working papers and national reports after this date, the Secretariat can no longer guarantee that these documents will be translated into the 6 official languages in time for the review conference. In such cases, an advanced, unedited version in its original language of submission will be uploaded on the website of the meeting, pending the completed translations. The list of speakers for the general debate will open on 30 March. States parties will be informed when the list of speakers for the main committees will be opened. Per the rules of procedure, original hard copies of the credentials of representatives and the names of alternate representatives and advisors need to be submitted to me not less than 1 week before the first day of the conference, that is by 20 April. These credentials should be issued by either the head of state or government or by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. In addition to the original hard copy, a scanned copy of credentials should be submitted through the online e-credentials platform on the e-delegate portal. Delegations will also need to submit their registration requests using the online e-registration system on the e-delegate portal from 9th of March. I want to turn briefly to the financing of the review conference. Please be reminded that costs related to the meetings of the NPT should have no financial implications for the regular budget of the United Nations. Therefore, sufficient funding for the review conference will need to be received from states parties in advance of the meeting and no later than 23 March. Notes verbals regarding the cost share for the review conference were dispatched to the permanent missions or to the United Nations of each state's party. Please reach out to npt@un.org if you wish to receive a copy of the note verbal. As of yesterday, 51 states parties have paid their assessed contributions for the review conference. The funds received amount to 27.5% of the estimated costs of the review conference. Separately from the NPT budget, and as states parties are well aware, the United Nations is still facing severe financial constraints due to the lack of the full or timely payment of member states' assessed contributions to the United Nations. The austerity measures currently in place at the United Nations headquarters will affect the organization of the review conference. For example, it is currently not possible to hold meetings outside of the official meeting hours of 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., and it may not be possible to have extended hours for official meetings. Furthermore, many service providers at the United Nations headquarters will not be able to guarantee services unless funds are received well in advance. Therefore, if sufficient funding is not received in time, the Secretariat will need to implement mitigation measures to reduce the costs associated with the review conference. These measures could include reducing the number of plenary meetings and postponing the translation of documents until further funds are received. The Secretariat will keep the President and states parties well informed of the financial situation over the coming 2 months. Finally, in terms of communications, as we approach the review conference, it will be beneficial if all states parties could nominate focal points to receive official email correspondence related to the NPT to complement the existing and traditional communication channel that exists with the regional group coordinators. We kindly ask all delegations to nominate, or if needed, update their focal points by writing to npt@un.org with the following information: name, position, location, New York, Geneva, Vienna, or capital, and an email address for focal points. Any further questions can be addressed to the Secretariat again at that email address, npt@un.org. Thank you very much, Mr. President Designate.
I thank the Secretariat for that briefing. I'll now move to the last item on our agenda, which is any other business. I ask if there is any other delegation who wishes to raise any other matter. I see none. And with that, I will make a few remarks. First of all, thank you very much for your participation at this briefing here today. I thank you, of course, for your support and your confidence in myself as President-designate of the review conference, as well as your strong commitment to ensure a successful review conference that we will have. I have taken very careful notes of the 19 speakers and the views of the 19 speakers that we have heard from this morning, and certainly will take them into very careful consideration. Allow me to take the opportunity to perhaps reiterate a couple of points. First of all, as I also indicated in my opening remarks, I understand and share the view of all states parties that the fact that the last review conferences could not reach an agreement on an outcome document may not have been because of the structure or the organization of the conference. At the same time, I have also heard in my consultations and also from my predecessors, as well as the chairs of the various prepcoms, on the lessons learned. And in many of those consultations, I have heard these complaints about the transparency of the process, about the inclusivity of the process, and of course also the efficiency of the process. It is based on these views and many suggestions, many lessons learned, that I am proposing that we make certain adjustments to the way that we conduct the conference. I have to reassure you that any of the proposals that I'm making are entirely in line with the procedures of the review conference. I understand, of course, and I share the views expressed before, that changes in the methods of work or the structure of the conference may not, secure a successful outcome. But I believe that it gives us a better chance to secure a successful outcome. And to the very least, it gives every delegation an equal opportunity to take part in all deliberations of the discussion. And to me, as someone coming from a country that usually have very small delegations, that is very important. And I believe that is important to the vast majority of states parties attending these conferences. The proposals that I'm making in terms of the changes to the structure of the conference also are based upon many of the very good recommendations that I found in the discussions that states parties have had within the framework of the working group on strengthening the review process that was established at the last review conference. So we have had several sessions of discussions, and out of them, many have emerged as kind of broadly supported. An example is, putting time limits on statements, and I can, kind of alert you to the fact that I intend to impose time limits on statements, in particular in the work of the main committees, with potential mic cutoff to ensure that we have, more effective and more efficient use of our time. I also intend, for example, to have a rolling agenda to allow for continuous discussions and work of the main committees. And then also, the early introduction of a draft outcome document, which I understand from our discussion today is receiving a consensus. So those are some of the changes that I intend to introduce. The one change that I find and I understand have not been, have not received broad support is the proposal not to establish, or the intention not to propose the establishment of subsidiary bodies. I have to make this point very clear, because this is absolutely not the cancellation of subsidiary bodies. The decision of 1995 on strengthening the review process, as I indicated earlier, was that the subsidiary bodies could be established within the respective main committees. I'm quoting again: subsidiary bodies could be established within the respective main committees for specific issues relevant to the treaty, so as to provide for a focused consideration of such issues. It also says that the establishment of such subsidiary bodies would be recommended by the preparatory committee for each review conference in relation to the specific objectives of the review conference. So that is on the procedural side of it. So again, this is absolutely not an effort to cancel anything, to be very clear. Secondly, it is absolutely not an effort to sideline any substantive matter. And as I mentioned, I am proposing structured thematic discussions on a number of topics, including for our colleagues from the Arab group, a topic in the main committee too on the Middle East. So again, this is not an effort to sideline a particular theme or topic. that I understand is, of course, very important to all states parties, in particular the Arab group. So these proposed thematic structured discussions, I hope, will provide more focused, robust discussions on these topics. How to organize these structured dialogue, I will continue, well, if there is agreement on such structured dialogues, I will continue my consultations with states parties to formulate a proper format. But it is my expectations that they will be more focused, based upon guiding questions, and there are various formats for that which can be under consideration. On substance, I take the point raised by some delegations about the need to build on the work that have been done before, even 2022 during the PrepComs. And also there will be many working papers submitted by different groups and by states parties. But it is my intention to also be able to listen to states parties in the general debate and also in the general exchange of views in the main committees before I am able to introduce a draft outcome document. So that is I guess already a major change as compared to previous review conferences. As to whether we can start negotiations even before the RevCon starts, I think this is a much bigger question that you can, as states parties, discuss within the framework of the review conference itself, so that a decision can be made on that approach. So those are my few responses to the comments that have been made. I will continue to engage with states parties on these issues in order to reach an agreement before the start of the conference. I am, of course, increasingly aware of the many challenges that we all are facing if we are to achieve a success this spring. But I still firmly believe that all states parties remain fully committed to the treaty and recognize that it is in our collective interest to strengthen it and keep it fit for purpose so that it remains an essential instrument for international peace and security. And as I have said in the past, there is no fixed template for an outcome document. There is no fixed structure of the conference itself. So let us all think creatively, innovatively, and demonstrate the utmost flexibility in how we approach the review conference outcome and organization. And once again, thank all of you for your very constructive participation in the consultations today. And I look forward to seeing you in subsequent engagements. I remain at states parties' disposal for bilateral, group, or other consultations, and I look forward to meeting with many of you in the lead up to the review conference. Again, thank you very much for your participation today, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.